All right. Well, thanks again for inviting me. I'm delighted to be sharing some knowledge about drought tolerant plants as part of your Gardening Adventures with Master Gardener Volunteers program at the Arboretum. I want to say I'm a huge fan of the Arboretum. I'm a member, and I was recently there for a conference sponsored by the Carolinas Horticultural Therapy Network. And every time I go there, I find something new. I find a plant that I'm in love with, and it's just such an amazing resource for our community. So very excited to be a part of this program. And I wanted to do my official, let's get my, I wanted to tell you what I'm going to talk about with a framework, which I typically do, which is to introduce myself as an Extension Master Gardener volunteer, tell you a little bit more about the program in case you don't know. Although when I was watching people come into the room, I saw a lot of my fellow Master Gardener volunteers, some long-standing members. So hope I do you proud here. We're going to talk about drought definition and a discussion about drought, just to do a deeper dive into what it means and some resources that share facts about drought. And we're going to then get into some drought tolerant practices. I'm going to share some plant lists. Then I'm going to take you through a romp of some garden photos that I recently took as I was focused on looking for drought tolerant plants, and they're everywhere, right? And maybe our eyes are accustomed to seeing lush green gardens, but drought tolerant gardens are just as beautiful. And as we're sort of slowing our summer garden and thinking about fall gardens, all of the beautiful colors and textures of drought tolerant plants are just magical. And so I'll share some photos from these various sites around Raleigh. And then we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. So let's get started. So the official slide of the NC State Extension Master Gardener Volunteer Program of Wake County. I've got my badge on here. And for those of you who are not aware of this tremendous resource, this is our office location at Carria Drive. There are office hours, so anybody who has a question about plants or any disease or pest pressure, you can call the office Monday through Friday from 9 to 12 and 1 to 4. You can email the email listed here, and there, of course, is a website for our program. So be sure to check out those resources. And a deeper dive, just because it's important. This is a really important, long-standing program that was founded in 1979. Again, recruiting and engaging people to serve as volunteer educators. And again, we're a program of extension. Extension is extending the knowledge of the university out into the citizenry with all of this science-based horticultural knowledge. And this is really an important, really focal point for this program, is everything we share is science-based. Again, the mission is to connect people to horticulture through science-based education. And I will say that I am a newly minted Extension Master Gardener volunteer. I trained in 2022, and there was a hold on the program in 2020 because of that big P pandemic thing. So the program stalled for 2 years. I was part of a cohort that trained on Zoom. And so I will say right out of the box, I'm not an expert on drought tolerant plants because I'm a new Extension Master Gardener volunteer, but the program gave me a base level of knowledge. It gave me more curiosity and resources of where I could find information. And certainly it gave me more confidence about how I can strengthen my horticultural knowledge base. So again, I'm 1 year in, and I think the more you know you don't know, which is cool because we're always learning as gardeners. And again, I'm going to be committing about 40 hours of service every year. So here I am at the Healing Transitions Men's Campus. So I'm co-chair of Therapeutic Court, which is a wonderful program. And we have about 12 programs going. Most of the sites are in assisted living communities or memory loss centers. I hang out at the Healing Transitions campus, the men's campus, and the women's campus, and they have gorgeous gardens there. This is a beautiful memory contemplative garden with a beautiful fountain, and there's also a very robust vegetable garden. So 2 gardens at men's, 1 at women's, just beautiful, beautiful gardens tended by Extension Master Gardener volunteers. My day job, I'm executive director of Raleigh City Farm. So typically I am really dirty wearing overalls and I've got dirt in my hands. And I love my job. It's around the corner from where I live. I've been doing this as a volunteer. I started as a volunteer in 2011. I now run the nonprofit. And again, it's a 1.3 acre site at the corner of Franklin and Blunt. I encourage any of you to come and check us out. And part of my job, of course, is to run the nonprofit and think about strategy and money and all of that. But half of the time I'm on the ground, and my hort knowledge has deepened. And as a result, I'm really very passionate and focused on the weather. So I'm constantly checking the weather. And of course, half the time it's wrong. But I really wanted to dig into drought to kind of ground myself for this presentation. So, the question, what is drought, as we talk about drought tolerant plants? So here's some definitions, a lot of words on paper, right? But, it's a period of abnormally dry weather, right? This is from the glossary of meteorology in 1959. Again, unusually persistent dry weather that persists long enough to cause serious problems. And actually, I liked this framework of 4 different drought definitions: meteorological, agricultural, hydrological, and then socioeconomic. And so how drought affects people and plants is pretty significant. So let's see. Okay, so here we go. So here is a really great resource called the NIDIS, which is the National Integrated Drought Information System. It's a multi-agency partnership that coordinates drought monitoring. So if you click on the website, and what the heck, I'm going to click on it and see if I can get back to my slide deck here. But yeah, here it is. So in real time here for fun, let me just search for North Carolina. And up comes, North Carolina. And so it shows you what's going on with regard to drought in our state, in our region. If you look at this map here, it does show some moderate drought in the sort of beige areas. So that's a really cool resource, and you can, play with it all you want. Let me get out of that. See if I can get back to sorry guys, back to my presentation. Right. So there's that. Let's see. Then I'm just going to highlight what was on that slide for you. So there are no counties, thankfully, currently with a drought disaster designation, yet there are some residents who are experiencing drought. And it's a 395% increase since last week. This was as of Sunday. This is the 42nd driest July on record since 1895. It's pretty dry. And we are down 1 inch from normal. So we have had in July 4.65 inches of total precipitation. And then it's the 61st driest January through July on record since 1895, again, with about 29 inches of total precipitation, down about 1 inch from normal. And as I'm reading this, I think, gee whiz, maybe I could be a weather woman. I could be behind that green screen, right, and do that. It's kind of fun, but probably not. So let's ask the question, when was the worst drought in North Carolina's history? What do we think? It was 2007. Actually, we moved here in 2002. And it was, I think the first year there was this massive ice storm, and it seemed like every year there was some major weather event. But it was 2007, and we've pretty much recovered, right? So let's go back to what we saw on the screen before, which is where we are today with drought, which is, again, abnormally dry, with 47.4% of the state abnormally dry, and then moderate drought. And of course, good old, a dahlia is roaring across the state, and hopefully we'll saturate our ground with some rain. It looks like we're going to have rain for the next several days, starting probably later on today. So we'll see if that changes our drought conditions. So here's another great reliable weather resource. This is on Instagram. It's NC Weather Authority. And this is a young man who does really very professional tracking of all the weather coming our way. So, as we are in hurricane season, this is another great weather resource. So let's get back to or into our plants. This is what we're talking about here. And so I thought it was important that we distinguish between drought tolerant and drought resistant, right? And so tolerant, you can tolerate something, or you can resist it. So tolerant plants can grow and thrive with minimal watering or rainwater, versus resistant plants can survive, for long periods without water. And so then a couple of practices, and these are some names you could, or practices you could think about, something called water-wise gardens. Excuse me for a minute while I take a sip of water. Because I'm water wise, right? Yeah. It's a good one, huh? So water wise, minimal water use in an established garden. In fact, there is the water wise garden. This is the Extension Master Gardener Volunteer Garden at the State Fairgrounds. And hopefully you can check those out, because they're beautiful and are showing how you can plant. There's plant material that just does not require that much water. Then there's something called xeriscaping, a very interesting name, which is another gardening practice to reduce or eliminate the need for supplemental water. So let's dig into best practices for planting and landscaping. So, pardon me, something in the air here. So my resource here was from the NC Botanical Garden, which is, again, a tremendous resource in our community. And of course, many of you know these practices, but I thought it was important just to review them. So when are we going to plant? Of course, in the spring and fall. We want to give plants a chance to get established and expand their root system right before the hottest weather or drought. We want to water in the early evening or morning to avoid direct water loss. We want to water slowly and by hand with a soaker hose. We want to water deeply to encourage deep, healthy root systems. And this was a great reminder to myself, because sometimes I overwater. I water too much or too frequently. And if we water deeply, water less, more deeply, our plants will be healthier. Of course, we want to apply mulch to help our roots cool and moist. And we want to seek better sources of water, right? Storing and using rainwater in rain barrels and other types of water sources. So what to plant? So we know this is the mantra, right, of our Extension Master Gardener program, is the right plant in the right place. And how often have we lusted after a plant? But we did not, we thought about the plant first, not the environment. Actually, we're currently doing a renovation of our backyard. So actually this presentation was a great opportunity for me to really take closer attention to my landscape and think about the soil, think about the sun, think about where plants want to live and thrive. So before we think about any drought tolerant place, we want to think about the place they're going to live in, right? So, wow, what a resource. Hopefully, many of you know about the North Carolina Extension Gardener Plant Toolbox. So this is a great resource that, let's see, I'm just going to dip in here for fun to show you how cool this is. This contains 4,688 plants that grow in and around North Carolina. It's free. It's a free resource for you. And so if I were to, type in here, drought tolerant. Let's see if this works. Maybe not because of too much action. Anyway, if it did work, it would point us to all these different plants that are drought tolerant. There's another feature that shows how you can, plant different. Oh, here we go. Great. So there are 1,319 plants. Wow. Then you can go here to, landscape, and you could say resistance to challenges. And I could type in here, drought, right? And then it refines the search for me. So this not only tells you, it has a great glossary of plants. It tells you how to pronounce their names, which I love because I'm still learning all of my scientific names. But again, this is a great resource, and it's going to keep swirling there. So let's see if I can get out of this. But yeah, so the word here is plant toolbox. Yeah, all these wonderful plants. Yep. So let's see if I can get back to my screen. Okay, there we go. So here are some drought tolerant natives. So again, when we think about drought tolerant, we want to think about their classification as drought tolerant, but we also want to think about planting natives if we can, to support all of our friends in the with wings and such that are keeping us fed. So this is again from the NC Botanical Garden, and boy, there's a lot of, oops, sorry about that. A lot of great varieties, a lot of names here. We've got our asters, our milkweed, Asclepias tuberosa. We've got our baptisia, of course, our sunflowers, our more asters, our phlox, our prickly pear, our black-eyed Susans, so many different plants. Again, you can go right to this website and check out the different plants. But I thought I would just do a quick little curated list here to remind us of some great plants. Agave, of course, the cactus family. Agastache is a great plant. I've put asterisks around the natives, and someone can check me on that, but hopefully I've captured that correctly. Baptisia or false indigo is a beautiful plant. The beauty berry, we have that at the farm. It's gorgeous with its purple berries and is a great source of nourishment for our pollinating friends. The butterfly bush, Celosia was the picture on the cover, and Celosia is an annual, but it reseeds. A beautiful, beautiful plant that is actually the annual plant of the year as classified by the National Gardening Bureau. Really stunning annual, great for bouquets. Coreopsis, of course, the cone flowers, which would include both your rudbeckias and your echinaceas, all kinds of beautiful grasses. Heliotrope, Joe Pye weed, can be, very, very aggressive, but there are clumping varieties and they're just beautiful and hardy. Lantana, all of our herbs, lavender, milkweed, the Asclepias tuberosa is a beautiful orange plant and beloved by our endangered species of monarchs. I love the rattlesnake master. I think it's a beautiful, beautiful plant. And we'll see some of those later in the photos. Of course, rosemary is great. Sage, sedum, all the stone crops, yarrow, yucca, and zinnia, which came up as drought tolerant. And it's a beautiful plant, very good for pollinators, and a great companion to your garden. So now we're going to take a romp through some gardens. And this was a trip to Juniper level Botanic Garden. And this was part of the, as I said, I was part of the Carolinas Horticultural Therapy Network Conference, and had the great pleasure of getting a tour. Tony Avent was there, and another person, I'm forgetting his name, but he's the top guy, and just rattled off the names of all these plants, and just it's mind-blowing. Of course, you probably know there are 4 open houses a year at Juniper level. Botanic Garden is affiliated with NC State and Raulston Arboretum. But look at this. You come into the parking lot, and just there are these massive mounds of beautiful drought-tolerant plants, all the yuccas, the agaves, Amsonia. I'm seeing a few other things back there. Let's take a look at the next slide. Here's a parking sign, and just everything is just looking great with very little rain. Only rainfall, right, is watering these plants. So I fell in love with this particular area of the entrance. Pardon me. So this is a heliotrope. And it's just so gorgeous, and it's living amongst all these other beautiful drought-tolerant plants. I even got a tag. It's called Heliotropum augusta lavender, and just it was looking lush and beautiful, baking in the hot sun, and just a really beautiful, beautiful plant. So more of our yucca and some agave and other ground covers. It looks like a little prickly pear there. This is the beautiful rain lily, which I loved. And lo and behold, when I went to back to the Raulston Arboretum for part of this conference, I bought 2 little rain lilies, and then I just, to remind myself what they were, I checked the Extension Gardener Toolbox, and it is Zephyranthes, right? And so I haven't planted them yet because I'm not sure it's the right place, because, as I said, we're still renovating our backyard. But I thought that since it's going to rain today, I would put them out again, and they'll get planted in the right place soon. But again, I love the fact that at Raulston, you have your little plant caddy there, and you can buy plants anytime if you visit. Really cool. So now I'm going to take a romp through some gardens. This is Preston Montague, who's an advisory council member of Raleigh City Farm. He also has a landscape studio. Actually, he is on Instagram if you want to follow him. But this garden is going to be featured in Walter magazine, I believe, in the November issue. He's got this tight little plot in Durham, and he has packed, I don't know, hundreds of plants in this little tiny lot that are just thriving. They're in the verge, as I call it, between the street and the sidewalk. His use of stones and his use of clumping plants and different colors and textures was just exquisite. Actually, he uses a lot of muley grass, the very glowy stuff. I didn't get to put a picture of that in there, but here you can see the street level and how this garden just is packed tightly so that it's suppressing weeds. It's all the root structures are supporting each other. And it's just, I love this garden. So this is Raleigh Ironworks. I'm not sure if anyone is familiar with this new development, but it's on East Whitaker Mill Road. It's as you're heading north on Atlantic. It's opposite the Dock 105.3, which is where Hummingbird Restaurant is, and the loading dock. This is a Gordon Grubb development, and it was developed by Future Green Studio, which is a very successful New York-based studio. Actually, my son used to work for them. But they have done a tremendous job of landscaping this massive, massive development. And of course, there's no water happening here. There's not any drip, but they have done a beautiful job of planting all kinds of beautiful natives, and there's beautyberry in this picture. There's And of course, there's a lot of grasses. There's some echinacea. There's sunflower. There's Joe Pieweed. Just a lovely assortment of plants. Here's the Joe Pie on the right. This arbor had some Lonicera. Again, lots of grasses. But again, it's massive. And so you can walk through it. There's places to sit. There's I guess several restaurants are open, and it's slowly rolling into getting totally occupied with its tenants. But again, Raleigh Ironworks, a great place to look at plants. So here is the governor's mansion. So on my quest for drought-tolerant plants, I would find myself just driving in the car and pulling over and stopping and looking at plants. And I'm not sure you're aware of the fact that the Roy and Kristen Cooper worked with Audubon Society, forgetting what year it was, but they totally redid their garden to be a pollinator-friendly garden. And I actually had the privilege of being back there when they opened it several years ago. But throughout the gardens, they've just got a lot of beautiful plants and really demonstrating the importance of pollinators, drought-resistant plants, natives, and this corner, which is at the corner of Person and Polk, is looking really good. So this is a brewery. It's called The Vault at 518 West South Street. And again, I just, was driving and saw this garden and thought, gee, this is a great example of drought tolerant. And so you see this is the rattlesnake master, which I love, with lots of yucca. And this is, it was a 98-degree day, and the plants look, they're slowing down, right? They're kept for the birds to eat the seeds, but it's looking really good. And I thought it was a great example of someone using landscape wisely to be sustainable and to support wildlife. So I love this garden. I take bike rides just about every day, and I ride through my neighborhood. I live in Oakwood, Mordecai, Oakdale, depending on my mood. I can be whatever I want to be, but I'm on Bloodworth, right at the cusp of historic Oakwood. This is in Mordecai, and I love this garden. It's a little cottage bungalow, and it's an L. Well, it's actually more like a U-shaped garden that runs all around the sides. Well, the sides of the garden, and this is another view of the garden. But this is, I'm lusting after this plant. This is the Rudbeckia Maxima, right? This massive, beautiful Rudbeckia. And so just the way this garden is sculpted with, it looks like sage, got the Rudbeckia, there's beautiful rosemary. She's got probably some phlox in there, just beautifully, beautifully done. So I really love this garden, and we'll take some cues from it as I think about my own garden. Of course, I don't have as much full sun, so that's my challenge. So this is down the corner from where I live, and I don't know if you can see the difference, but Oakwood has these little gardens that accompany the historic Oakwood signs, and I'm part of the Oakwood Garden Club, and I'm a so-called sign angel. So this is the garden that I tend, but I candidly I don't tend it that much because it does its own thing with rainwater. So there's just there's good old actually Nandina. We're going to take that out. There's some liriope. There's some of course some Rudbeckia. There's a rosemary on the side, and the picture on the left, some other little there's some vinca, but this picture on the left shows it really kind of gasping a little bit when there was really, really high temperatures. And of course, I don't water it. And the picture on the right shows, you can see the plants, are hanging out, waiting for a drink, looking fine. But then after a really nice flush of rain, everything looks much more hydrated and green and lush. So this is Raleigh City Farm, and I had to put a picture of my little friend Romy in there. And here is this huge border of Celosia, which I just love. We have the red variety, we have yellow, we have white, and it just there's a little drip in there, but not much. It's more dripping other sides of this border, but it just looks fabulous, and it does reseed. So be careful. It can take over a little bit, but you can pull it out. But I've suddenly become very, very fond of Celosia. And here's another view of Raleigh City Farm, another garden with lots of beautiful zinnias. There's an Arboretum and dahlia. We've got gomphrena in there. We've got some what do we got? Yeah, gomphrena, two types, and scabiosa, but lots of great bloom in there. And there you see in the distance the Celosia and some ochre, which looks lovely set against the reds of the Celosia. Gee whiz, that's my romp through drought tolerant plants. Here is a close-up of the Celosia, and boy, it just transforms into these crazy ragged heads, and I just love it so much. So I would pause and ask if there were any questions. I've ripped through this presentation pretty quickly, but there's my parting slide with all the stats again. So I'm going to stop my share and jump in and turn it over to Elizabeth to see if we have any questions.
Actually, as a matter of fact, Elizabeth has turned it over to me because I have joined the presentation, and I will MC our little Q&A portion if that is okay. But we did have a few questions come in. One person asked, since many of us have clay-based soils, how about drought-tolerant plants that grow well in those soils, not just drought-tolerant plants that want excellent drainage or always dry conditions? Do you have any recommendations of plants that'll do well in our native soils without too much amending?
Right. So I'm reminded of a comment by Tony Avent that when he bought the property at Juniper Level Garden, I think it was, it was basically, it was a tobacco field, and he has both our clay of Piedmont, and he has sort of a silty of our coastal soil. And if you go to Juniper Level, I mean, that they've certainly mended it over the years, but he is growing all of those beautiful sedum and agave. So I believe based on a visit there and knowing that the soils are amended, that those, if you have full sun, right, you can, those plants are pretty hardy and can tolerate clay. But still, I would encourage folks certainly to get a soil test, right? And so soil tests are something that are easily available through the Extension Master Gardener program, just so you know what you're dealing with and what your pH is. And certainly we want to amend the soil as much as we can, right? Either through mulching or again, just letting our leaves fall and letting them help regenerate the soil. So my first, direct answer would be, look at, if you have full sun, look at those, really sturdy plants like the agave or sedum, and do a soil test and think about regenerating your soil so it's healthier and for plants and doing its work to pull carbon.
Okay. Well, you suggested people plant, well, you have the caveat if they have full sun. What about drought tolerant plants for people who don't have full sun? Are there any drought tolerant plants that need shade?
Right. So, I Well, remember, now we get into our distinction of, what is full sun, 6 hours of uninterrupted sun, right? And then we have, part sun or part shade, and that becomes sort of a 3-hour window. I will say that I have, I have a lot of Rudbeckia and Echinacea growing, in a number of different conditions. I see it on the farm, it's in full sun. I have it in my garden, it's not full sun. Is it total shade? No, it can be partial shade. So, but I think this was a question, total shade, was that the...
We do have a lot of people growing in dry shade down here underneath pines and stuff, completely shaded and very dry. What are some examples of plants that can tolerate shade and drought?
Okay, so you know what? I'm going to just do a quick. Now I'm going to use my toolkit here. Yeah, so remember we have our hostas. Of course, we have our our May apples. We have some geranium, hardy geranium. We have some Solomon seal. Again, I wish I could be, as I said, I'm not an expert, but I would encourage people to go to the toolbox that I shared with you and really play around with it, because there's so many plants that are so much information there that can really point you in the right direction. Not just whether it's shade, but what type of garden you're trying to create. And that's why I love the toolbox so much, because it does give you different types of garden themes, whether it's, whether you're looking for pollinator friendly or cottage garden or all those different types of gardens. So hopefully that, it looks like Susan, someone has, was it Susan? Someone just chatted, and I would also rely on my, as we are a village here of master gardeners, it's, if somebody has any, if there are other chat worthy or comments in the chat that where people are answering the question that I'm. Oh, Christmas ferns are good in shade and are drought tolerant. Thank you, Jane Boyer. Yay. So ferns, yeah, lots of ferns, right? So Blake, I'm actually looking at the chat, but do you want to, have you found, I don't know if you're going sequentially, so maybe we can find some more questions that I can try to answer.
Absolutely. So someone asked about Joe Pieweed specifically, because they said that they saw it on your suggested list of drought tolerant plants, but they were under the impression that Joe Pieweed prefers mostly moist or occasionally wet soil. Do you have any comments on
that? Okay, so that is that could be calling me out on that could be a fact check. So I think of Joe Pieweed still as let's just, what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to literally go to my
well, maybe I might be able to help you along. I know a lot of people use Joe Pieweed in rain garden situations where they are generally built to take a huge inundation of water, but then also once that water is gone to be able to withstand those drought conditions when there isn't water there. So they're pretty adaptable to both situations. From what I understand, they can take a large inundation of water, they can handle the wet feet, but they also can adapt to more dry situations.
Well, there you go. Yeah. So, so thank you for clarifying that. So that's a really great comment. And also, yeah, I think Joe Pieweed was kind of maligned as being just a real, I think, aggressive plant, but there are certainly clumping varieties that are less likely to spread throughout a landscape. And I had it in there. I took it out, but I put it back in because I think it's just a beautiful plant.
Sure. Okay. Well, somebody's pointing out that they're noticing in the weather patterns, long periods of high heat and drought with sporadic torrential downpours, which often cause flooding. And they're, a bit concerned about if they're, with how variable the weather is, if they're putting drought tolerant plants into their landscape, like, are they going to be able to handle those inundations of water if they have large rainstorms like that?
Right. Well, that's a great comment. And like thinking back on your comment that was, how can plants be multifunctional, right? How can they both be, able to, take, massive influxes of water and then to also withstand heat. And then I think it's really how your landscape is managing water, right? So you could have a dry rain garden, or how you divert water, I think is really important. And so that could be less a plant question as much as a landscaping. Actually, our landscape is slope, so we're putting in a dry rain garden of stones. So it's obviously thinking about permeable surfaces and how your soil, right, is handling the massive influxes of water. So yeah, I think it's both a plant and a landscaping question.
Sure. Paul sent me an interesting question. He asked earlier if drought tolerance equates to heat tolerance. Are those the same thing?
Let's see. Stump the speaker. Blake, what do you think?
They're very different. I've just started, so I grow bonsai trees in my front yard, and I use a very aggregate substrate for them because it gives me the opportunity. It allows me to water them multiple times a day. And I'm not watering them for the sake of giving them water. I'm watering them for the sake of cooling down the pots, cooling down the root zone. Like, they have plenty of water. They just can't handle the heat in that tiny little pot that they're in. And I'm growing some house plants too in my office at the Arboretum. And like, I'm noticing that I can just I can completely forget about watering them because they're not taking on the heat so much. Like, they're not even really telling me when it's time. They're not suffering, even though I'm not really watering them. So it seems like water and heat are two different things that they're dealing with.
Right. But, of course, if you're dealing with, little tiny pots too, of course, we know that if you're doing container gardening, that's certainly a whole nother, challenge of keeping them watered because they're not in the soil. But so hopefully that answered that person's question.
For sure. Okay. And so Bill pointed out that you showed a lot of like the place between the sidewalk and the yard, the verge, you called it. Do you have any more suggestions about what plants can go in such an area?
Well, actually, I have the plant list that Preston shared with me, and I bet I could, share it with everyone else if I could find it. But like there were, like, if you think about, that is hot baking sun, right? That is just full on sun, and how many beautiful back to the the sedums, the like actually all of the drought tolerant plants that I shared in that list are suitable. Of course, then you want to think about height. I mean, do you want more low lying plants? Do you want phlox, or do you want something that's low lying versus tall, which could, I don't know, somehow impede or people walking. So I think being mindful of the plant's height could be important. But gee whiz, all the plants that I shared in that list that were drought tolerant could certainly live in the verge. And I think the verge is often a very forgotten space, right? However, let's remember, I live in Oakwood, and I love animals, but you got to think about dogs too, candidly. I mean, I have one of those little signs that says, "Don't pee on my garden." And the Verge, I would say, is the classic spot where dogs should pee. And if you're planting something that is very precious, beware of our friendly canines who should be peeing there, not on your side of the street. That's sort of, I'll get on my high horse about that, but got a little off topic there. But yeah, do think about other pressures on planting in the Verge.
For sure. Okay, we have another question here. Kurt's asking, can you list any drought tolerant vegetables? Maybe this might be a discussion on how vegetable gardening and water-wise gardening might be two very different things.
Yeah, so right off the bat, I'm remembering okra came up, but that's another quick, let me just remind myself. I think our nightshades are pretty drought tolerant, right? But this is great. You guys got me on my toes here, and this is still my dress rehearsal for being. If you invite me back next year, I'll have more answers in my head instead of on my phone. One sec. We have to put ourselves out there, right? And yeah. So let's see. Yeah, I'm talking corn. That's pretty. Rhubarb, chard, asparagus. Yeah. Rhubarb. Huh. Yeah, Swiss chard, asparagus, artichoke, corn, whole beans, chili peppers, squash, melon. Yeah, I mean, they're basically naming all of the, okra. They're naming most of our summer crops. I mean, at the farm, we use a drip irrigation. We water as much as needed. Again, I think it's still a question of starting with healthy soil, right? Starting with healthy soil that can support the plants. And then if there are enough nutrients in the soil, the watering can be less important. So that I would have that to say about that.
Okay. Do you have any tips on protecting marginally hardy drought tolerant plants through the winter, either from a perspective of reducing the temperatures they're experiencing or the rainfall that they might take on?
Any tips? So I've got to be honest. I mean, I have a pretty large garden at my home. I garden at Raleigh City Farm, and we have a little place in Boone. So I do not baby my plants. I don't have time to baby my plants. And I've often heard people say, we have to take care of ourselves first and let the plants, I think it was Helen Yost, who's on our advisory council. And the plants, if you baby them too much, then they're not going to sustain themselves. And so again, it's back to right plant in the right place. I mean, even at the farm, I do not pull up dahlias. I don't, I've been known I have some beautiful hydrangea, and if there's because I love them, if there's going to be a, cold snap in April or something, I've been known to throw a sheet on top of them. But I would still just say, like your plants should be, should survive, and you don't want to have to worry. I mean, you want to support their healthy growth, but you don't want to be too obsessed with with keeping them alive, because there's, this weather is getting, crazier, right? And unpredictable. So sort of living with that unpredictability and still right plant in the right place would be my advice. But don't,
for sure,
grasp onto you. We can grasp onto many things, and I've done that, but sort of letting go of that and, and taking some losses maybe here and there. You get to buy a new plant.
You don't want your garden to be so much work that you never have any time to enjoy it. So,
or to worry about it too much. I think.
Right. Yeah, definitely. It should be nice and easy and fun.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that looks like that is all the questions that have come in for today. So thank you very much, Lisa, for pulling this presentation together for us. It was wonderful and good to see all these plants and places throughout Raleigh. And thank you, everybody, for joining us this morning for this presentation. We will have another Master Gardener presentation next month on the 25th, and we will be joined by Gail Beaulieu, and she will be talking attracting wildlife and butterflies. So be sure to join us for that one next month. We will see you all then. Y'all take care.
Thank you so much.